Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our Library Resources and Research for Entrepreneurs event. In part 1, we discussed about various resources available at the libraries, and we showed an overview on how to access them. Today, we will work with a specific case study for an assistive technology, hand prosthesis, to show how you can utilize these resources. So let's welcome back our presenters. We have Holly, who is the Associate Manager at the Edmonton Public Library Makerspace. Then we have Celine. She's the Business Librarian, as well as the co-lead at the Library Entrepreneurship team. And then we have Colleen. She's the Community Librarian at the Stanley A. Milner Library. So we'll start with the Territorial Acknowledgement first. The University of Alberta, its buildings, labs, and research stations are primarily located on the traditional territory of Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, and Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe nations, lands that are now known as part of Treaties 6, 7, and 8, and homeland of the Métis. The University of Alberta respects the sovereignty, lands, history, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit nations. Let's have a quick overview about Health Innovation Hub and what services we offer. So what is Health Innovation Hub? It is a community incubator for innovators and entrepreneurs working towards better human health outcomes. What do? We help health tech entrepreneurs achieve commercialization success for their health and life science technologies by providing programming support, access to space and training resources, coaching and consulting support, and connections to peers and advisors. Some of our services that we offer are programming support, project-based consulting, access to space and equipment, access to a community, and facilitating connections. We also will have a scientific advisory board very soon. We offer business development playbooks, business coaching, business and marketing strategies, financial projections, and then soon to come a talent hub and a job board as well. So member companies at the hub receive access to drop-in space and can secure dedicated desk space to operate and develop their health technologies. The Health Innovation Hub is 24/7 security patrol and completely secure. Companies also receive access to reception services, a business center, lounge space, and a shared kitchen. Moreover, custodial services and utilities are taken care of so the companies can concentrate on growing their health company. Part of navigation services we facilitate the connections to partners, funding bodies, lawyers, consultants, advisory. We also offer connection to other innovation resources at the U of A. We help navigate the ecosystem by providing information about programs, events, professional development opportunities, job boards, and also guide them how to access those. And finally, the Talent Hub, which is coming very soon. It is a great opportunity for students to access health startups, network with founders and other employees, to get information about job postings, networking events, company and founder spotlights, as well as volunteer to build social capital and expand network and get experience working for companies. It is also an amazing opportunity for companies to connect to the student community at the University of Alberta, to post the jobs and to get the talent they need, to network with highly skilled researchers, graduate students, and postdocs, also hire for part-time and full-time internship positions, and more. What is our business model? We start with the initial application, which is received either via online or recruitment to the hub through outreach, as well as referral systems. Then we move into the analyzing the application. So we look at the application first, we set up a meeting then with the team, and then determine the fit of the venture. Then we identify the areas of support and identify and ascertain goals. We work with a hands-on model. So we set up monthly cadence of meetings. We actively work together, and also we get support from the MBA interns that provide business support. We also track the progress. If you'd like to reach Health Innovation Hub, you can contact us via phone. The number is 587-568-9012. You can also contact us via email at healthhub@ualberta.ca. Visit our website. It is uab.ca/hhub, and also visit and follow our LinkedIn page. We're super active there. Let's take a look at the details of the case study we'll be working today. So Sumita is a postdoctoral student at a university in Canada. She has been researching non-medical hand prostheses and assistive aids for adults with limb loss or limb differences. She has identified that many patients need prostheses that can load and securely seat standard radio frequency identification fobs and cards commonly issued by companies to seamlessly facilitate movement through a variety of secure corporate offices and institutional spaces. The prosthesis should also enable the user to open door handles with or without codes, and also to press buttons when a key entry is required. She plans to develop a commercially available set of models that can be purchased and printed by institutions with 3D printers. These models will also have a print-on-demand option that can be purchased directly, with options for size and color customization. She also plans to include a user-fitting guide with the models. Sumita has the necessary knowledge of the science behind the technology, and she is confident in her scientific abilities. However, she has never worked in a company or startup before and is a novice in the business. So what are the next steps for Sumita to start the venture? So first, she needs to do an extensive market research to validate her thoughts and understand what the market for prostheses and assistive technologies looks like in Canada. Then she needs to build the prototype and design the logo, and finally to develop the business plan. So let's take a look at our presentation outline for today. We're going to start with talking about how you can get a library card. We'll then move into identifying the resources required for our case study. Specifically, we'll look into the market research, business plan, design and prototype, and day-to-day operation. We will then have a wrap-up and a 5-minute break. Then we can come back for the Q&A session. With that, I will give the floor to Holly and Celine and Colleen to take us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you. I'm just going to share the screen and we get started with how to get an Edmonton Public Library card. So your Edmonton Public Library card is the secret to unlocking all the resources that we'll be talking about from the public library end today. So if you already have a library card, that is awesome. So this is just for getting everybody else signed up now. There are 2 ways to get an Edmonton Public Library card. If you can visit in person to any one of EPL's 21 locations, you will need identification such as a driver's license or an Alberta healthcare card and proof of an Edmonton address. So often that will be your driver's license, otherwise a rent receipt or piece of mail that you've received at that residence. Proof of address is necessary for getting a library card, as most of our licensing agreements for online resources are tied to geographic residence in Edmonton proper. If you do not have anything with your current address on it, if you stop by one of the libraries, we have postcards that we can mail to you, which by virtue of being processed through the Canada Post mail system, become official documentation as proof of your address. If you can't make it to any one of our 21 locations or want to get started as soon as this presentation finishes, you can register online for a library card. And while no physical card is produced, it is created as a full membership. The online registration process uses a service from a trusted third-party vendor called TransUnion to present a set of multiple choice questions related to your personal financial history, such as the amount of your last utility bill or credit card payment. Only you should know the correct answers to these questions provided by TransUnion, therefore confirming your identity. Edmonton Public Library cards are free, and being able to access information that helps you realize your dream is priceless. So now once we've got our library card, your library card will give you access to over 120 online resources, and this is from research to entertainment for adults such as yourself and to children. Most of the resources can be found on the Edmonton Public website at the following path. So from EPL under digital content, and subject is business, finance, and law. And we're going to illustrate how or when you can use the relevant resources when working through the case study. There's also a handout linked here. So EPL resources for entrepreneurs, which will include all of the resources that we will be talking about today. And I'm going to turn this over to Celine.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Celine. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit. I'm coming at this from the University of Alberta perspective. And so it's tough for me sometimes to refer to University of Alberta library resources because they are limited sometimes to particular users and specific use due to the licenses we sign with our vendors. However, some things to keep in mind is that if you are University of Alberta University of Alberta alumni, there are some electronic resources that you can sign up for and use. And so the link is on the slide, and you can also contact the University of Alberta Library for more information about that. As well, we have a entrepreneurship and innovation subject guide. So these subject guides are kind of like menus that librarians create for our users. And these subject guides have all these resources. And this subject guide specifically really focuses on openly available resources, or resources where you don't have to be associated with a specific library to use. And so I'm just going to pop that into the chat right now. Another thing to keep in mind is that visitors to the University of Alberta Library may access library licensed online content on site only. So to access these online resources, if you are in Edmonton, you can always come to the U of A library and you can obtain a temporary network ID by presenting a photo ID with a proof of a Canadian address at any library service desk. However, in all of these cases, you do have to just kind of keep an eye on what resources are available, because there's still these limitations even for on-site access to some of our resources, which is just the case with, once again, those licenses we sign. So that said, though, really we'll be focusing on Edmonton Public Library resources and resources that are more freely available to everyone in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through that first step. Well, that first step of getting a library card would be that first thing that Samita would do on her journey. And so let's say Samita is on this journey, and the case study that Marina takes us through, and also that was written on the Eventbrite, there is this real emphasis on market research, and that Samita believes that to be really important. So we're going to start that as our first path on this journey, and I'm going to talk us through that element of her journey. So now Samita wants to conduct extensive research. So it's important, and some of you might recognize this slide or recognize this kind of content from other presentations you come to, but I think it's really important in business research that we talk about that there's normally two different types of research. In business, we often talk about primary and secondary research. And so primary research is something we would recommend that Samita does in this case as well. So this is research she does herself, information and data that she gathers. Now, the library steps in when it's secondary research. So secondary research can make any kind of decision she's making stronger, more robust, any kind of point she's making in her business plan more robust. But it's kind of a note of caution to do not get overwhelmed by only using market research, right? That you want to use all these tools at your disposal. Now, since for secondary information, you're not collecting the information yourself, it is important to look at the secondary information with a critical eye. And so it's really good practice to evaluate the information you're consuming in the critical manner as well. And there's different frameworks for evaluating information. There's a ton of them, but I feel like it really comes down to these 4 questions. And these 4 questions are, 1, who provides the information? Is it reviewed? Is there an editorial board of anything you're reading? What kind of authority do those who provide this information have? Are they experts in the domain they're writing about or they're providing information about? And then what is the goal of the author or the provider in all of this? And then lastly and not least, what is the reliability of the information, and can it be verified elsewhere? So can you verify this information elsewhere? Are the sources cited? So sometimes even you're using something that's not an academic source, and that's fine, and it's online, but it might be highly cited, and they might be citing like government statistics, which are pretty reliable in this context. And so you can kind of depend on that information. So these would be things that I would want Samita to think about to set herself up for success. Now, the other thing I want Samita to think about to set herself up for success is who cares about her industry when going into market research. So, and that's a really good way to find high quality secondary sources. Who cares enough about your topic? So in this case, it would be prostheses and 3D printing. Who cares enough about this to produce really informational and high quality data on this topic? Now, for many, creating a business plan these days, you do talk about market research, and a framework that is used often is the TAM, SAM, and SOM framework. And so many of you might have seen this framework before. So you want to look at your total available market. So who can potentially buy my products and services? And in this context, I'd say, well, you probably want to look at government statistics. And also there's the Statista database that we aren't going to get into today because it does have restricted access, but it also has a free component. So this is something to definitely look up for yourselves as well. And depending on your context, you might find some good free resources on there. Then there's the serviceable available market. So who can your products realistically reach? So once again, SAM is smaller than TAM, but, and that would be government statistics, articles, market research reports. You probably want to look at that kind of information. And then serviceable obtainable market. Who are my most likely buyers? And that you probably want to look at market research reports. You probably want to look at articles as well. Just a note, sometimes instead of available, there's the word accessible to use. So just something to keep in mind. They are used interchangeably. Sometimes there are slight differences in that though. Now, as you can see in this, we're looking at kind of three major components of information. So we're looking at articles, we're looking at market reports, and probably government statistics. Now, what you have access to changes depending on where you're located, what libraries you have access to, but we're going to kind of break that down a little further of things Samita would have at her disposal using the Edmonton Public Library. So let's talk about news and professional articles. So there's a few examples here, and this is not necessarily comprehensive, but these would be places I would recommend Samita starts. So I'd recommend she looks at the Canadian News, Business and Current Affairs database, which we're going to go into, New York Times, to which you usually need to pay for access, but Edmonton Public Library has access to that, Press Reader, and the US major dailies, to which has a lot of the US major newspapers. So in terms of this is where we get into the exciting demo part of our presentation, and also where, in terms of this, you might want to follow along. So this is where I invite you to all follow along on your personal devices if you want to, and that way you can kind of see if there's any hiccups along the way and ask us if there are any hiccups. So I am on right here, Edmonton Public Library, EPL.ca. I went to digital content, and then I went to business, finance, and law. And here we have all these resources for that. And Colleen and Holly will talk more about EPL resources, but right now what we're going to do is we're going to scroll down to Canadian News, Business, and Current Affairs. This lives on a platform called ProQuest. So I'm just clicking on that. And I had logged in before this presentation, but it is asking me to log in again. So this is where you'd put a username if you've created one, or your library barcode, and your password as well. I seem to not be able to present without making some kind of typo, so we'll see if this went through, and we'll see if that worked out. But looks like we were lucky this time here. So as I was saying, this database, what it does is it aggregates, so it brings together all these different publications, so you aren't searching necessarily different publications in one spot here. And so what you see here is you see our general basically the general display of this. Now, just a kind of note too, you can click on right here, change databases on the ProQuest platform, and you can change the databases you want to look into. This is a little awkward because it's bringing me back to the library website. Sorry about that. Just a little hiccup here that I have as a saved one. So you can pick which databases you want to look in terms of that. We're just going to go back and we're just going to go back to that first path. Sorry about that, folks. Just what happens sometimes when you do live demos. This is the excitement and fun of it that you're getting, the live hiccups. And also it makes you see that we make little mistakes sometimes, and information searching is not necessarily always the most linear process in terms of that. Okay, so it's just logging me in here. Okay, so here, what I recommend is when you have a kind of really in-depth search you want to do, you probably want to start with your advanced search. So this is probably the place you want to go right here. You probably want to start with your advanced search. Now, what you probably want to do is you want to probably search for, right here, we're going to start with hand prosthesis, just like this. Now, just a little tip too, is that whenever you are looking for two words together, what you want to do, and you don't want everything with hand and everything with prosthesis. You want to put these between quotation marks. So now look at hand prosthesis. Now, the thing is with these databases, all these different authors and all these different publications use different language, right? And that seems really obvious, but when you're searching in something like that, it's easy to forget that. So what you can do is you can link these with ors in between them. So I'm going to look at a hand prosthesis. I'm going to look at prosthetic limb. I'm going to look at hand loss or limb loss as a publication right here. And what that does is it expands the results I would get. So I'm just going to search this right here. I'm going to hope this works because it did when I did the search prior, but never know. This is where information is dynamic. And you're getting, oh my goodness, so many results. Okay, so you're getting over 4,000 results. That's a lot. And so what I would recommend is then you can add things to that search. And what you can do is, this brings us back to like junior high mathematics, where you're using like Boolean operators, you're using the parentheses and stuff. So I'm going to put this in parentheses, and I could put and 3D, and I'm just going to put this in here, 3D printing. Just like that. And you could also use synonyms for 3D printing as well. And then I can search this. Take a look. It's taking its sweet time here. This is my laptop working real hard for us. And so right here, what we're doing is we're limiting the results to smaller results. And now we're getting 151 results. Okay, that's much smaller, and that's really a little more relevant to our results. The other thing we can do is that we can limit them using the left-hand side and say, well, I only want trade journals, or I only want scholarly journals, right? So you can limit that, or I only want things in the last 12 months, or I only want things in the last 5 years. And then you're limiting things further. And there's other limitations like subject, like language too. Like if you are only speaking English, you might want to limit it even further. And so that really, really helps limiting it. And so other words that I would suggest, if Samita came to me and was asking about this, I would also suggest, well, you might also want to say, and 3D printing and device. That might be another word that in our searches we kind of found really well. Another thing you might see in this is you might see the acronym NOFT when you're searching a database like this. NOFT means that what you're searching is you are not searching the full text. You're just searching titles, abstracts, subject terms. And so, oh, and that's more results because I didn't put that 3D printing in there, but that does limit it. So it's not anything and everything that mentions hand prostheses, but it's the ones that really mention it as a very specific term. And so this is down from the 4,000 to 200. That's still pretty good. Other things to keep in mind is that when you are, you can modify your search by just clicking here. And when you are doing a search and in that advanced search, there's a couple other things you probably want to look at. There are thesauri right here. And in those thesauri, there's a language that's very specific to the databases you're in. So, oh, well, maybe this one doesn't necessarily use the word 3D printing, but use 3D printers or something like that. Or they really use limb loss, not hand loss. And so that way is to use another way you can use this. There's a lot of other complexity in this kind of searching that when you book appointments with us, we can kind of take you through. But something to keep in mind is that all databases that are more academic, more scholarly on this side of things, like ProQuest, they all have help files. Right here, you can see this at the top left, top right. And so in terms of that, those help files really help show you what kind of language this database uses. And so I'd also recommend that Samita goes into there and kind of explores in terms of that. So this is ProQuest. As you could see when we did that search, it contains all these different kinds of publications. You've got the academic stuff, you've got the non-academic stuff, you've got more of the news too. And I really like CBCA too, so the Canadian Business and Current Affairs database, because it is very Canadian focused. So I know we might have people from around the world here, but if you are doing anything in a Canadian context, this is a great database to go through and a really great one for you to have access for through the Edmonton Public Library. So that's the one demo I'm going to show on the articles. And so I kind of did that as a general thing, but you could also even add to that search market research, market resources, and then you could look at that. There is a real crossover between market and industry, so I kind of left it a little general right now, but obviously using that kind of verbiage can be really relevant. Now, the other thing I just want to mention when we're looking at articles, there are some really great free, reliable places to go. These are kind of the ones that I tend to direct people to. Some of these may have slight paywalls, but between what is free online and the Edmonton Public Library, you get really good coverage. So these might be other places you want to go. So I would also say, well, Samita, you might also want to look specifically for academic articles. And so if you're looking at academic articles, there's a few different places you could go, even if you are not associated with a university. One of them is Google Scholar. I've used Google Scholar. I know that might be sacrilegious in some library circles, but I think it has a lot to offer. Some things though to watch out for Google Scholar is not everything on there is scholarly or reliable. When I heard that as a student, I know my head slightly exploded. So hopefully yours isn't too much either, but not everything on there is peer reviewed or reliable. So be diligent in checking those questions and go through those critical thinking steps as well. However, they do have a variety of resources. So book chapters, books, articles, conference proceedings, white papers that can be really useful. The other problem with Google Scholar as well that can be difficult is that they do not necessarily show you the same results for every single person, right? And so it is personalized to your browsing habits. And so it is a little unreliable too if you're trying to recreate results. The other thing I'd recommend if you're using Google Scholar is you will hit paywalls, but you can always download Unpaywall. An Unpaywall is a Chrome extension add-on that when you're looking at an article that is behind a paywall, it will scan the web for a free, legitimate version of this article, and it will link it to you if that's possible. And they're always adding, so you can see this number tick up. You just saw it when I logged on here. The other thing too is I'd also recommend checking out DOAJ. So what does that stand for? So that stands for the Directory of Open Access Articles. And this is really high quality journal peer-reviewed articles that are freely available. So you can look specifically in there and kind of make sure that these are a little more tried and true results than just Google Scholar. That said, let's take a look at Google Scholar. So in here, it is different than a database. So you can kind of just put in a whole phrase and not worry about as many of those issues in terms of that specific searching with the Boolean operators that we did in ProQuest. So I'm just going to put assisted devices for hand prostheses. And so here you're getting a lot of results. And so you're getting 26,900 results, which is even more than that 4,000 when I looked in the database, right? So there's a lot of noise when we are searching this way. However, there's things that you can do. So if you find a really, really great article on here, what you can look at is you can look at who cited this article and who do they cite. And that's a really good way. I'm saying, oh, this might be a really, this is a really interesting article for Samita, and who cited this article? And then you can look at who cited them and link to those kinds of texts too. So that's something I would recommend in terms of that when you're looking, and something I'd recommend for Samita. Now, the other thing is the directory of open access journals looks like this. Once again, I would say like just a general search for something. This doesn't have as many publications as something like Google Scholar has. So this is where you might want to just put limb prosthetic in there and look at all the fields. And it is linking me here to this one as well. We're just going to go through this. Sorry about that. This is one of the problems of having logged into U of A stuff before as well. And so here what you do is it's searching and it's finding a lot of journals in there. What you can do, of course, is you can limit it to, I want this in the title, I want this as keyword, I want this as a subject as well. The other thing you can do is in the searching journals here, you can definitely limit it to specific fields. So you can say, well, I'm really interested in this in a technology sense, so I'm just going to limit it to technology. You can limit language, etc. And so this one is a really interesting resource. You will probably get less on here than you would in Google Scholar, because Google Scholar is returning all those results in terms of that. So that kind of brings us to an end of articles, where we've kind of seen, well, those articles for more news outlets, more trade publications through Edmonton Public Library, those academic articles. And so we're going to kind of move on to talk about statistics in this sense. So in terms of statistics, these are great sources of information to get to know who your consumers are, who are your potential consumers, all those TAM, SAM, and SOM that we saw beforehand. And there's really a few places that I recommend going in the context of Canada, but obviously if someone's coming from elsewhere, look at your government statistics in terms of that. And so we've got the Canadian census data is really interesting. And one that is very interesting for market research is the household spending data. And you'd be surprised how granular that gets as well. In the context of Edmonton, from where we are right now, I would also recommend the Alberta Open Data if you're in Alberta, and the Edmonton Municipal Census. So we're just going to demo some places specifically. It's easy for me to say, oh, let's just look at stats, but when you're getting into it, I know these websites can be complicated, so I'm just going to show you some key places you can look at as well. And so in terms of that, on the Statistics Canada website, one first place to go is the subject areas. The subject area groups like statistics with like statistics. So you can see how this would be very interesting to entrepreneurs in different industries as well, right? And there's also the business, consumer services, and culture, which for any industry, this is very interesting, I find. But in this case, what I'd recommend Samita looks at is I'd recommend that she looks at the health statistics right here. This subject, and there is even a subject on disability, and so you could see all the information about Canadians living with disabilities, about that. And you can, once again, this is kind of like the tricks of the trade you learn. All this filtering you can do on this left-hand side, right? You can just kind of look at all the filtering, say, well, I just want tables, I just want, et cetera, et cetera. So you can do that. The other thing that I recommend as well is when you're on the Statistics Canada page, is there is the daily right here. And the daily is really interesting because it has just daily topics that they kind of do deep dives on right here. And you can actually search the daily, and I can search it, for example, for disability. And also because I know from the subject, from looking at the subject, that that is a word that Statistic Canada uses. So I might want to keep using that word when I'm searching right here. And so here we get these results of the daily of things that would be like kind of deeper dives on data. The other thing too that you can look at is infographics. StatsCan has some really interesting infographics. Now, I find that the easiest way to get to their page is just to go statistics. This is where you're seeing me with all my typos here. Statistics Canada and infographics. Just using Google, and it should bring you to the infographics page. It's easier than it is maneuvering to it. That's just like a little trick with that. And then you can kind of scroll through the infographics. You can see it by subject as well in terms of that. And these are really, really great pages that I would recommend taking a look at. The other thing you can do is you can search the website as well. And so you can just take a look at the website. What you can do is look for keywords. And now that I know through the subjects, once again, those subjects are such great places to go. So if I say Canadian with disabilities, then I might get some really interesting statistics. And that's something for market research is if I'm looking at who would use a device like the one Sumita wants to use, this is where I'd get the statistics that would be interesting to me. Now I can sort these and kind of look at all the content, latest content, whatever works best here. I can kind of scroll through and look at some really interesting data in terms of that. And that's one way through it as well. And so that is something to look at. The other thing, as I mentioned, is if you're in Alberta, the Open Data Alberta is a really interesting database. In here, I would recommend, like, you can refine by subject. So you could look at health and wellness in this case, of course, and look at all the results for the open data, for Alberta Open Data, or you can also search even in here. I know that the word disability right here, although sometimes it has a negative connotation in these communities, what it does is it does show you the language that the government is using. And so that's another interesting thing we deal with a lot in librarianship is sometimes we're using terms that might be not the terms that are preferred by the communities, but the terms that are used from people assessing these communities, bringing data up on these communities. So just something to keep in mind too. The other thing in market research that I would recommend looking at is trade associations. And that's where you kind of want to use Google for this. And so what I would simply do is I would look at Prosthetics Trade Association Canada and see what comes up. And once again, using my judgment of what seems to be reliable information in terms of this. So here I'm seeing the Orthotics Prosthetics Canada right here. This might be a really interesting website. And the reason why I look at trade associations is one, they might group together, if you're doing B2B, so business to business, they might group together some people who would be your market, who would be potential customers. They also probably have some resources too. They might have reports about, here I see documents and forms, they might have reports on people working in this field. And so that's just something that I would really, really recommend taking a look at when you're looking at this, is those trade associations, and remembering to take a look at that. And as we saw in the Canadian Business and Current Affairs database, there is that tab where you can look at trade publications too. So that's also somewhere where you want that trade association work. Now, in market research and in market analysis and industry analysis, often we're talking about competitors or potentially collaborators. So we've been focusing this previous section of this presentation on like understanding your consumer, right? Looking at statistics about them. But the other thing to consider is your competitors. And there's some considerations in there. Think about who cares about your profession, industry, and possible customers. So here I would say for Sumita's case, who cares about 3D printing? Who cares about accessibility? Then remember to look up those trade associations and organizations, and also think about your geographical location and how it interplays with the service or the product you are trying to market, right? And then, are there any competitors who could become collaborators? And maybe not businesses, but nonprofits, for example. So who cares about this and might not be in competition with you, but might be really great collaborators. So to find competitors info, this is where using primary research is to your advantage. You can use Google to find competitors' websites, social media, etc., news about your competitors, and information about trade associations. You can also use those news and article databases to look up news about competitors. You can use the Edmonton Yellow Pages, specifically for Edmonton, or any Yellow Pages for any other geographical region, to look up companies in your discipline. And also, Colleen's going to cover some great databases to look at those. And I'm going to stop talking soon, but I do want to show you some specific in this, how I'd go about kind of looking at that. So I might just start with a very general kind of Google search. And so what I might want to do is just search for something really simple. Like I'm going to search right here, 3D printed prosthetics, because that is the product. So I'm searching for the product itself, right? This is one way to go about Googling this. You could also go about Googling this by looking for the competitors themselves, like businesses. Now these, you can see, these are all ads. So I'm probably going to skip these ads for now, but I might also want to look at that. But I come across this one and I say, oh, NIH, that's the National, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the acronym for that one. But I can see this as a government website here, right? Oh, it's the US Department of Health and Human Services, National Institute of Health. I can just pledge like ignorance as a Canadian for that one, for the acronym of that one. But here I'm seeing this really interesting 3D printed prosthetic devices. I'm seeing these models that are really, really interesting. And I'm going, oh, this is quite interesting. And so what I'm looking at is who authored this, right? Taking myself through those steps. Enabled. Okay, who is enabled? I might click through here and I discover Enabled. Right here, which is an online global community of digital humanitarian volunteers using 3D printers to make free or low-cost prosthetics, upper limbs. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe these could be collaborators. Maybe these are not competitors. Maybe these are collaborators. And they've got so much information right here as well, and designs too. So this is a really interesting one as well. The other one that I found doing a quick Google search too is that there's definitely Thingiverse too. And Thingiverse, if I do any kind of Googling around 3D printing, this one shows up as a place to get designs. There's also the Neil Squire Society Makers Making Change Assistive Device Library, then the NIH repository for 3D models that we saw. And then in terms of trade organizations, I might want to take a look at the Orthotics Prosthetics Canada too. So if I was Samita and I was Googling, I'd probably be coming across these. And I just want to show you, even like if I had searched 3D printing, 3D printed prosthetics, another result that comes up is all these designs that I have access to through this website, Thingiverse. So just to kind of get you really looking at these designs. Just like that. So this really covers market research and then some, I'd say, really some resources to getting to know your consumers through those articles, through those statistics, but then also just using that to your advantage in terms of that competitive analysis as well. And so with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing here after I show you one last slide. And this is kind of, we've shared the link to our slides at the beginning of this presentation. I'll pop it in once I'm done talking again. But there's also, we've got Google search tips too. So while you're searching these are a few search tips. I think a lot of you are probably pros in using Google already. So I'm going to not go through all of these, but just kind of leave it there as a cheat sheet for you. And once again, don't scramble to take notes. We'll give you the link through our through the chat for these slides. And I'm going to stop presenting, turn it over to Colleen, who's going to show you other amazing library resources. Take it away, Colleen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Celine. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and let's see if this works. Perfect. So we're going to talk about some of the resources for the business plan, and this will we're sharing. There we go. And this will incorporate sort of perhaps like a structure of where some of the information that Celine has been sharing and where it can go and sort of like organizing your thoughts. So in addition to the business model canvas that the Director of Entrepreneurship had shared with Sumita, some other examples of business plan templates can be found in the Business Plan Handbook series through the Edmonton Public Library. It is a series that are examples of actual business plans compiled by entrepreneurs who are seeking funding for small businesses. So actually, we're going to, no, sorry. I'm just jumping to, there we go, our Business Plan Handbook. So again, there is a link in the handout that takes you directly to the resource as a landing page, but also through our digital subject link for business, finance, and law. So the Business Plans Handbook is essentially annual, maybe a couple of times a year. You can we're just going to start a fresh one there. There we go. So we can search the book series itself. Sumita did try doing some research. We tried to use terms like prosthesis, prosthetic, assistive technology, 3D printing. We weren't, as you can see some of my searches, we weren't having much luck finding a business that directly linked to what she was looking for. Hand or limb loss, again, did not return us with any results. Manufacturing did get some results, but they weren't quite a match. It is, a business plan that we could look at. We did find one that we would maybe take a look at, so rehabilitation. And we thought that the medical equipment producer might be something that could give us some information. However, the one nice thing about the Business Plans Handbook is even if you don't find something that directly matches the business that you're starting, in each volume, there is a generic template, which, like I said, will kind of give you that structure. Talks about the different parts that would be included in a business plan. So again, ways of framing and some of that market and research that we were doing. So this is the Business Plans Handbook template. One of our other places for business plan templates is the database Mergent Intellect. Now, this is a database that is typically a fee-based database, but the library does cover all of those subscription fees. Sorry, I'm just moving that. So if we check the business templates here, this one is much more extensive than the Business Plan Handbook. That one gave us about a 4-page template. The blank business plan template from Mergent is a 19-page document. And it'll come up as a PDF document or a Word document. And again, so covering the executive summary, looking at your company and financing, what are your products and services, who are your competitors, market overview, market trends. So again, just another way of structuring the information that you're collecting, or maybe even like pointing out some of the places that you do need to look for more information. We're going to go back to Mergent. And instead of just looking at our templates, actually, where am I? Here we go. So places for looking for industry and competitor information. Mergent Intellect is the one that we're going to run a little test demo through. Mergent Archives is reports covering the industry overview, who are the key players. The catch with this one is that the latest reports are from 2020, so they are annual reports, but there has been some lag time. So if you're in a industry that is a fast evolving industry, the 2-year-old report is maybe not going to hold the information that you're looking for. O'Reilly for Public Libraries is built has ebooks and audiobooks and videos, all based on technology and business. So sort of learning plans and curated playlists, but it also has the case studies, which are 1-hour interactive events that explore how organizations have overcome common challenges in business. Again, I was looking through the case studies. We weren't able to find ones that pertain to 3D printing or prosthesis. They were a little bit more general in terms of business and some of the technology, but that's not to say that there isn't something that can be learned from them. The CSA standards and material safety data sheets, which Holly will speak a little bit more to during the prototyping and design section. So let's go back to our Mergent Intellect and see what we can find for Sunita. So you've come in through the path through the library's website. The first thing you want to do when searching Mergent is you're going to uncheck the box that says results will include only US companies, because we want to make sure that the Canadian companies are included in this as well. You can search by company, executive industry, or new US businesses. We're going to go in through industry because we have the NAICS code to sort of target down. So 339. As you can see, as you're typing the numbers for the code, it's narrowing down the classifications. So we're going to get to medical equipment and supplies manufacturing. Now, it's found us over 33,000 results, which is a lot to wade through. So if you go into view results is where we can start limiting and putting filters on the results. Couple of ways you can filter. We can look at narrowing by country. So if we actually want to go in and see just what are the Canadian companies, still going to give us about 7,000, which is still a lot to consider. But now our result list is, again, it's the top 10 businesses by sales. What you can do and where to find some more industry information. If you click on the first business, or any one of the businesses actually, so if we click on the first business, it's going to come up with some news, company information, company details. Where we're going to want to go is into industry details. And so again, we are looking at surgical appliance and supplies manufacturing. There is our NAICS code. This first research industry report is available as a PDF. These are updated frequently. And this is produced by Dun & Bradstreet. So we're going to get a complete industry overview, looking specifically at the competitive landscape. What are some of the advantages? What are some of the companies to watch? So that might give us an idea about who some of the bigger companies are and what they're working on. Looking at products, operations, and technologies. You can maybe see if your idea is fitting into what is sort of ongoing in the industry, or is your idea, Sumita's idea, completely new? So this is something that you can download and access. Goes through the regulations, some other international insights, looking a little bit more regionally. What's the growth look like for this industry? Pandemic medical robots as an opportunity. What is the industry impact? I'm going to back out of this one for a second. So the other way that you can limit your search, again, we're going to go back to our main list of not the Canadian results, but we are back to the beginning again. And again, we are looking, so again, our 33,000, we're going to view the results. Another way to limit is using the advanced search option. Okay. Savita, we had tried using as a keyword, again, prosthetics and 3D printing. It was not picking it up. So instead of just as a general keyword, the other option was to use it as a company name. And we dropped in prosthetics actually in the company name. So we're down to about 3,700. So now this is giving us companies that specifically mentioned prosthetics, the company details, the industry, financial details about the company itself, sales in millions, number of employees. The industry details will take us to the same first research report, because it's all tying back to the surgical appliances supplies manufacturing. Can pop back to company details. And again, following up, we can see some of the other, they've also doing the search, if we wanted to search, it's linked through the SIC code as well. So we mentioned the business templates for emergent intellect as well. Some of the other resources they have, as Celine mentioned, they do offer like help guides. This is one of the ways to like get to know a resource, as well as the how-to videos. So I think now that we've kind of got a little bit more market information and ways to structure these things, we're going to turn things over to Holly for the prototyping and design aspects.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks, Celine. All right, everybody. So Samita's been doing all of this research, and a good question is, how can she sort of test out some of these ideas as she's developing her business idea further? Now, it was mentioned that she's a postdoc, so she may not have access to labs that she's previously had access to, or any of the fabrication facilities that maybe she had access to in the university. So what's available out there? Well, one of the things that's out there is the public library, and public libraries have, some of them have maker spaces. And for those of you who are newer to the term, the maker space is really a collection of equipment, resources, often also maybe training or human resources like personnel or staff who can provide training. And these spaces are really designed to help people who are interested in learning and, or maybe interested in sort of the hobbyist or creative expression side of things. But we think that they might be useful for someone like Samita, who's starting out too, and really needs to learn a lot more about the specific fabrication technology that's kind of at the heart of her idea. So in this example, one of the things that I want to kind of call attention to is something that came up in Celine's search. And I want to highlight that there are going to be some limits for what Samita can do at the public library. There's a lot of heavy emphasis on open resources, open learning, Creative Commons licensing, and not all of those objects or assets that are in that framework might be appropriate to take and try to commercialize. It might involve entering into a licensing agreement with the rights owner, or it might involve developing your own design. So that's one thing that I think is important about this example that I'm going to show you. I think also another really important thing for Sumita's case is the public library's equipment is really designed for learners and for hobbyists. It's not necessarily going to be medical grade and not intended for medical grade applications. I think though that there's still quite a bit that Sumita can learn with some of the prototyping equipment that the public offers. And there may be some other surprising ways that the public library's makerspace can also support her project of sort of bringing this business idea to life. I also wanted to shout out this particular prosthetic model that's going to feature in this case example. This is one of the Enable hand prostheses. And as you can see, a whole team of designers put this together, and it's a fairly mature model. So I just wanted to point out the great work that this nonprofit is doing. And again, I think Celine's framing of them as like a potential collaborator for a business person looking in this area is a really great way of thinking about this. So turning to the case a little bit more, Sumita has sort of the heart of this idea. She's identified that, you know, moving through spaces that have secure doorways is a bit of an issue for some of the clients, maybe that they're seeing on the rehabilitation science side or the OT side. And I found an example when I looked around in our own institution here of a bit of an awkward placement of a door handle and an RFID reader, which if you had some limitations in your mobility could be an issue. So Sumita might be collecting some of those examples as well. She may have, as mentioned by Celine, previously found one of these prosthetic hand models and is interested in creating a proof of concept. And then through her searching through her standards and the idea of the RFID fob device, she may have located some information that kind of helps to build out the specifications for, you know, that technology. Some considerations around planning her design, such as, you know, what's the transmitter strength? Is she going to be able to transmit through this 3D printed material? What kinds of other considerations are there? Do these come in a really standard format? So she's doing a lot of research to kind of get to the point where she might make a proof of concept. In terms of what she can learn at the public library, there's definitely support out there through the library's 3D printing self-serve service, where she can get some help with the planning of the design for a proof of concept. And again, you know, she might have identified a few examples of the RFID. She can learn a little bit about the particular fused deposition modeling 3D printer that the library has. This is the Prusa, which I provided a link to, and its capability and dimensions. And she might search a little bit more about other people who are operating farms of these printers as she's thinking about the process of maybe becoming a provider of 3D printed products. As well as mentioned before, the material properties of the plastic. The library is providing access to a low-cost plastic called PLA. It's a non-toxic, biodegradable, and it's quite forgiving for beginners in 3D printing. So it's a great material. It may not be suitable for all applications. For example, it's not going to be great for long-term use in a situation where it's exposed to UV light. It's going to have low resistance to water as well. Not good for everything. It's a little bit brittle under force in comparison with some of the other plastics out there, but it may be good for Sumita to kind of develop a general concept and test out on a platform her idea. Another thing that she may need to learn about are sort of the tolerances. So what are the differences between the model as drawn in the software and its geometric dimensions, and what are the differences in how it actually prints and the minor expansions that you get as the thermal energy is transferred into the plastic. This is something that she may want to do a little bit of testing around. So in terms of kind of testing out her design with the public library, there's a couple of options for creating the models for 3D printing. And, you know, scanning is certainly something that people are asking about. I'd say for EPL, again, with this very beginner and enthusiast or hobbyist space, we don't have very accurate scanners. We have sort of very low poly impressionistic style scanners. So it might be best for Sumita to actually try to build a model based on some of the samples that she's collected or maybe has found. So the staff at the library would be able to help her with sort of coming up with a model based on gathering the dimensions. We have a lot of the tools here for just doing this on pencil and paper, if that's something that she'd be comfortable with. If she has more experience, there's going to be software here that she could probably go in and draw it up with as well. But these are this is something to consider, depending on what kind of other resources she's able to find out in the community, or through some of the supports that are out there for entrepreneurs, might be able to access higher quality scanning hardware as well. So in terms of the 3D printing for prototyping, after those initial dimensions are gathered, because we're looking at really securely seating this RFID device, there's a couple of ways that could be built up. And, Tinkercad is really, it's a web-based free application for 3D modeling. It's really designed for a younger audience. I'd say we'd had kids as young as 4 have a lot of success in this application. But for adults who've never 3D modeled before in their lives, it's also pretty friendly and a pretty good way to get started. I'm guessing as a scientist, Sumita may have had some background with some kinds of software, maybe some coding. So it may be a bit on the entry level side, but it's there, and she could make a fairly good proof of concept to work from. Just using Tinkercad, she's going to be able to get something that's more dimensionally accurate in a software like Fusion 360, where there's much more precise modeling and sketching capabilities. So she may go to that, and that's provided on the library's computers. It's also free for hobbyists or for sort of personal use. One thing that Sumita may need to keep in mind as she's going through and starting to move towards commercializing this idea is perhaps the licensing implications. So she may have to look at a yearly subscription depending on what she's doing with a piece of software like Fusion 360. But these are great options that are out there to get a basic design up and running. In this case, I use Tinkercad just to show a quick example of how she might together. So this is really focusing on the palm of the prosthesis design. And her idea here, just to get a rough proof of concept that maybe she could do some testing with once it's fabricated. We have sort of the fob design that was made in Fusion 360 in the previous example. And we've created basically kind of an enclosure for it and are planning to create a simple press fit enclosure. This may not be good for sort of the final, as she moves towards the final version of this product. And there would be some other challenges that I'll speak to in a moment, but this might be a good way to get a product out there and start to do some testing, or even start to develop from this product as she's talking to other professionals. One of the things that she's having to keep in mind here is, we want these devices to be fairly, I'd say, comfortable to wear, not so heavy, and not also, if you're using a pre-existing design like this, considering what other things the design is having to do. So these are little thread channels for the rigging that actually animates the prosthesis for the gripping action. So she'd want to make sure that her design is working as a whole. And this is a quick way to kind of pop it on top of the object and fuse them together. So that's just an example. It's very simple. I think, again, an experienced scientist like Sumita would probably have a more precise way of approaching this, especially if she's really motivated to dig into the 3D printing and the 3D modeling applications, the CAD applications, but she could do a pretty quick rough concept as well. In terms of at the public library, once she's taken the training, she's booked a session and she's making her print. This one is roughly a 0.15 millimeter layer height for its resolution. So fairly fine detail, comparable to what we were seeing in the example in the very first slide with a version done by Enable. This one's been roughly scaled to 135% based on their sizing guide, and the print itself is running for around 11 hours. So Sumita arrives at the library, she makes her booking, she spends the first 30 minutes with the staff member going over the printing plan, and then the print runs for 11 hours. Sumita can leave after that first 30 minutes of observing the print and making sure everything's going okay. And the staff will unload it for her and send it to her closest local branch for pickup. She's using around 83 grams of material, and at the library's rate of 10 cents per gram, this is an $8 prototype to produce, so fairly inexpensive overall. She's working with the STL format. Now, one of the things about this model that I think Sumita would have to consider in her design process is Typically, these are designed so that the sizing is done through scaling in the print control software. And so the problem with the way she's approached this with her first draft is that the RFID enclosure is also going to scale based on the sizing guide. So she may have to get into something a little bit more complicated, some sort of scripting or some sort of connector that she would build to be able to pop the RFID enclosure on at the right size after the model is scaled to fit the user size. So that's just a limitation that I want to point out with this particular design approach. I mentioned Fusion 360 before, and another thing that Sumita may run into is if she's working with an STL file, these are really more so layer lines and geometry, and not so much a solid object when they're imported in the STL format. It's really a mesh that you're bringing in. So she's going to have more success if she can find the original CAD files, maybe working with the people who developed them as a collaborator, or potentially even remodeling a file or capturing a new scan to work from. So that's just a limitation. It could be quite onerous to turn this into a solid in order to make some of the operations and modifications that she'd need to run to fit that little RFID device on it. So that's just a caution to be aware of as well. As I mentioned, EPL provides Fusion 360, and it's providing at the Stanley and Milner Library the customer training on the operation of the printer as well. The material is 10 cents per gram, and there are some amazing resources through LinkedIn Learning through EPL as well. So, there's even a whole section in there, additive manufacturing tips, tricks, and techniques on 3D printing for assisted tech. There's a Fusion 360 course on a 3D printed enclosure, which is very much what Sumita is trying to do in this case with a third device. So that's something that she can definitely take advantage of with her library card, and just the coverage in general of 3D printing and of Fusion 360 and modeling software is phenomenal in LinkedIn Learning. So definitely something that we would be trying to recommend her to look at. Now, there's some other aspects in the case setup for Sumita's project too, and it's surprising, but the makerspace may also be able to help her gain access to software and resources to address these too. So she's thinking about developing a sizing guide so that users can fit the prosthesis. She's able to potentially, she might need some graphics, some photos, or a logo. She may want to do a product trailer video and maybe have a full pitch presentation video at some point. And she even may want to do small run promotional items as she's starting to show off her idea and perhaps seek funding support or seek further entrepreneurial development support. So in terms of how the library can help in this case, there's a number of different softwares that are provided free for access in library. Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro would be her go-to for video editing. She's able to use Illustrator for creating vector graphics, maybe for her logo or for some of her graphics in her sizing guide. And InDesign as well is full featured for design and layout for that printed guide that she's working on. So lots of great things that can be accessed for free with the library card. As well, for the videos, voiceover is a common thing that people need to do, and even maybe podcasting, depending on what they're up to. So sound recording is another thing that Sumita could take advantage of at both the studios at Milner and Whitewood Crossing. These spaces are free to book for up to 2 hours at a time, and there's help from the staff getting started. So that's another thing that Sumita could make use of on her trip to the library. The library is going to be introducing some other great resources coming soon, some options for videography and photography. So we're going to be introducing a studio lab with cameras, lighting included, and some training. So if Sumita wants to do her product video or wants to do some product shots, she would be able to work with the library on that. In the meantime, she may also be able to reach out to Innovate Edmonton, which also provides some services for entrepreneurs. There's a fee basis for them, but they have some options as well and may be able to help. And in terms of Sumita's idea for small run promotional materials, so this could be like t-shirts, tote bags. The library has Cricut machines. She can take her graphics that she's made in Adobe Illustrator and bring them over and put them on the Cricut, producing t-shirt designs and learning how to cut those all out. I'd say probably this if thinking of her time and, you know, time being money, she probably doesn't want to do a large run. She would probably want to work with an actual business for that. But again, maybe just for those initial steps in this direction, the library would be a great place to get help, and the material is provided at low cost. And of course, there's training for the users too. So lots of options, and the possibility of making decals or the version that can be transferred onto garments. And just a little bit of an animation here to show you what that process looks like. So she would be able to receive help actually getting her design transferred and pressed on the garment and peeled away, and get some advice from the staff too on temperature, materials, and settings for that too. So many different things that Sumita could potentially do at the public library, from the 3D printing to sort of all of the things around her business idea as she's starting to develop and share. Lots of potential ways that she should make use of the Stanley A. Milner Makerspace. I'm going to pass it back to Colleen for the last section here.
Very good. Brilliant. Thank you. Let's just take a look at resources for day-to-day operations. So we know that EPL is here to support your growth mindset. We all know that entrepreneurship is more than just having a brilliant idea. There's also the day-to-day operations of running a business. So Gale courses are available through Edmonton Public Library. These are interactive, instructor-led courses covering a wide range of topics. The courses are designed as a 6-week session with a final exam and a certificate. There are courses on everything from accounting fundamentals to purchasing, manufacturing, supply chain management, project management, or computer programming. So just a wide variety of classes. As Holly mentioned before, the LinkedIn Learning as well. These are video-based on-demand learning. So certificates are available, but there's not that same element of interactive with the instructor or with other people who are taking the class at the same time as you. But again, just over 16,000 classes, I believe. So everything from the Adobe Suite, Tinkercad, and Fusion 360, as Holly mentioned, and the medical assistive manufacturing or 3D printing for assistive technology. Hundreds of courses on entrepreneurship, business finance, and operations management. I already mentioned O'Reilly for public libraries. So in addition to the case studies for industry information, business and technology ebook, curated audiobook playlists, and expert designed learning paths, O'Reilly is one of the access points through EPL's collection for the Harvard Business Review books. And I think I'm turning this over to Celine at this point.
Awesome. So just a few last words here, and I'm just going to screen share as well. Yeah, this is the beauty and the challenge of us all presenting, but we just really want to say thank you for listening and sticking with us for such a long presentation. And I think a presentation that just like really shows the depth of what libraries have to offer in this very specific case. And we hope Sumita has a wonderful rest of her journey here. Sorry, I just, my screen is taking a long time to share today. But we also want to thank our student helpers too. So Joelle, Deanna, who are students at the School of Library and Information Studies, who shadowed this presentation and put in some really great input. And then also Arun, who's been putting all these helpful links in the chat. And we just really want to say thank you to all of these students who are really amazing at supporting this kind of work. And then we also want to say thank you to you and any questions. I know 2 hours is a long time to sit at a desk. And so if anyone's needs that bio break, I say go for it now, because we're going to take kind of a little 5-minute breather. Also this way you get to really like kind of incorporate everything you learned, and we'll be around for a little bit to answer any questions you might have. But also these websites right here are great ways to get in touch with the University Library and EPL. And there's different ways. There's ways to chat with us, with a real person online, or email us, different ways to get in touch. So
sorry, Celine, to interrupt. Would you mind if everybody can turn the cameras on? We'd like to take a picture before we go on the break.
Oh yeah, of course. Happy to do that. People are willing to do that. I'm happy to have that.
I just want to mention, as a former MBA student, I wish this was presented to me during the orientation, to be honest. Like every second time I'm watching it, and I'm just amazed with how much information there is for free.
And what I would say is get in touch if anyone's in if anyone is in school right now at business school, get in touch with your profs and say, hey, can we get a librarian in this class? Or get in touch with anyone organizing orientation and say, can we get a librarian? Because I mean, I can't 100% guarantee it, but I feel like at 95%, there's a librarian that's waiting to come and talk to your students about it, and is as passionate as all three of us about this stuff. So that would be my, it's a good little push to be anyone in school right now, talk to your prof if you want a librarian to come in, or talk directly to your library too, but talk to your profs and your administrators. Yeah, we want into those classrooms.
Excellent. Is everyone ready?
Yeah, I'll say 3, 2, 1, and on the count of 1, you can just smile. Yeah. All right, perfect. Everyone. 3, 2, 1, smile. Awesome. Thank you so much. You guys can go on a break, and then we have Q&A for as long as you want, and then we can conclude the event. Thank you so much for coming.
So we aim to come back at 3:25, if that's okay. Thank you.
I guess we're all here. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to answer after that hour and a half whirlwind, though I know that's a lot of information to take in. So if you also don't have questions now, also if you need to leave or anything, you're welcome to do that. We don't want to hold you hostage, but we're here for another while if there are any questions.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. You touched on the shelf life of some of the information that we might be looking at. Somebody who is interested, for example, in putting together a business case or developing a prototype. I am wondering, how would you describe the shelf life of some of the scholarly resources that you introduced earlier on in the presentation as it relates to health tech and business in general?
So I can take this, definitely. And I mean, you might hate this answer, which is the typical librarian answer, but it depends. So it depends on what you're looking at exactly. And the thing is, there's a few considerations though. So I'll answer this with a few considerations for you. One is that you have to recognize that scholarly publishing takes way longer than publishing something on a blog or even a news article, even a trade publication. So scholarly publication, it's not unheard of that it might take years, often months, but sometimes years to publish. I was just talking to a scholar yesterday who's been working on a research project for 10 years. Right? And the publication process is just at the end, they're getting there now, but they've been working on this for 10 years. And so there is something to be said about the rigorousness. You have to balance this rigorousness of academic resources with the time it takes to publish them. And so I think so often in academia, we hold these academic resources up to such a high standard. Oh, it's the best possible thing, but it depends on what is most important for your case. Is your case to get the most cutting edge, most up-to-date information, or is it to get the most reliable information? Because sometimes those don't go hand in hand, and that's unfortunate, right? It's just not a perfect world for that. So keeping that in mind when you're looking at it makes sense. I would never put a specific date on it. And I'd also say the most current is usually the better information in business, because markets move fast, industry trends move fast, and it depends also in your industry. And so this is where you might want to do more reading about your industry and see how fast things go in your industry, because some other reports about your industry might give you hints about that too. So it's not a date that I'm giving you, but more those considerations to think about. And that's a great question, Joelle. Thank you for asking that. Thanks for your question.
I really appreciate the response. And it's those kind of those guidelines that I was hoping to get at, and I thought that was quite helpful. Thank you.
I can go with a question if nobody has one. So makerspace seems to be a very in demand, I would assume, area. How easily accessible is it? And is there a waiting time? What is the process like to access it?
Thanks for the question, Marina. So there's, I hate to also echo Celine's answer, but it depends. For example, in the case, Samita may want to use the Creative IMAX. Those are typically available on a drop-in basis. Users can definitely book them online through the library's website. And there's found at more than just the Milner Library. Abbotsfield, Capilano, and Londonderry also have the same IMAX, and we're working to roll more out in the system. So for any of those functions around, use of the Adobe Creative Cloud products, video editing, even sound editing, and the illustration, that can probably be done the same day. For the 3D print, one's a bit trickier. We ask users to take a 1.5-hour online course to learn about the fundamentals of the technology and the safe operation of the 3D printer. Once they've completed that course, they're able to book an appointment, and we operate that service Thursday through Monday. And there are typically three printing spots a day for the 3D printers. So there's 2 that are available in person here at Milner, and then we're also offering a virtual appointment once per day. So typically people can book within the week. Sometimes it'll be next week. And I'd say in general, we're working to get an online booking version that's a little bit easier for people to navigate. With the recording studios, those ones are super popular because they're not just used for podcasting or voiceover, they're also used heavily for music and music production. So those I would plan 2 weeks in advance to get in touch with the library if you'd like to use one of the music recording studios. The vinyl cutting equipment, that's typically, I'd say, a call ahead, but can be available on a drop-in basis or usually booking the next day. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much again to all of you who delivered such a wonderful presentation. I just have a quick question within the makerspace as well. So my team and I are planning to give our student volunteers for our startup some swag bags, like just little mini totes. And so I have this idea that we can, now knowing about the amazing makerspace resource at the EPL, to maybe come and do some make some of those swag bags. So just wondering if we can purchase those, if there's options to purchase maybe some swag materials at the EPL, or do we have to carry those materials ourselves, bring those ourselves, and whether there might be someone willing to assist us in the library if we don't know how to operate the equipment.
Thanks so much, Nicole, and thanks for your question. So we provide the heat transfer material, and we make that available for $2.50 per square foot. So a piece about this big, about the size of my head on the screen, is around $3. So it's a very affordable service. And we don't provide access right now. We don't sell like garments or tote bags. There's a few different places you could get those locally, and sometimes people go to a craft supplier like Michael's to look for that. Typically, what will work really well with our equipment is garments or totes that have a high natural fiber content, so primarily cotton, sometimes bamboo as well. It is possible for us to have blended materials that are polyester or have other basically plastics in them, but we have to use lower temperature settings. But the staff are here to help you with that. When someone books the vinyl cutting equipment and the heat press, we include training and support in their first booking. So the first 30 minutes, we take the customer through the safe operation of the equipment, and we have you make a little demo project so that we know you can operate the tool safely and that you've received that instruction. Once that's complete, the staff are there to support you. So as you're working through, like, they're going to show you the whole process and work through it with you in an example. But after that, they're also there if any questions come up or you need help with troubleshooting. And typically we book people out for about 2 hours at a time on each of the tools, so on the vinyl cutter and then on the heat press. If you're like, we recently had somebody who is getting all of the t-shirts for a wedding party that was quite significant. So we worked with them to book them over the course of a few evenings so that we were kind of spreading out the use so that they could come in, work for a few hours, but then we'd have the tool available for others as well. So that's kind of the general approach that we take with projects like that. And let me know if there's any other follow-ups, but yeah, it sounds like a great project idea.
Thank you so much, Holly. And just a quick little question. So my brain, I forgot my question, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, one second. So the library card, my library card unfortunately expired. So I was wondering if I could do that renewal process online.
Yeah, you can definitely try it online. And you can also call into the library, and the library is able to look up your information based on, name and other details like that, and may be able to assist you over the phone or even through chat as well. So definitely get in touch. If it has expired, it's possible that we're able to renew it. If someone's never had a card before, as Colleen mentioned at the very beginning, going through online is a way to go, but I'd check in with us first.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you back as an active library member. There's so much great stuff.
If you don't have any questions, we can also conclude the event. Marina?
Sorry?
I was saying, like, if you don't have any questions, we can also conclude the event and let people have their time back as well.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions at all? Anyone?
I'm going to throw one more in there.
Okay, go ahead.
This is something that you also touched on in your presentation that I thought it would be valuable to expand since we have the opportunity. So when entrepreneurs are evaluating information sources for the integrity of the information, are there any guidelines you'd like to lay out in terms of the credibility of business information out there, or any common pitfalls to avoid when you're doing research?
I mean, I'm happy to hear what Colleen and Holly have to say, but I can definitely chat about this one. One thing I just kind of heard recently from a business colleague, like a business librarian colleague at their institution, is that bad resources can sometimes still cite really important and useful data. And so I found that really interesting because, once again, the way the librarians see information and see data and peer review kind of being held as the gold standard, but sometimes you stumble upon a blog and it is terribly written and you're like, there is no expertise here, but they cite some kind of like report made from an official government agency that you're like, this is really interesting, and then it leads you to there. So I think don't use this as a way to use just blog kind of content, but definitely if you're seeing something useful in a source that you say, I don't think this is a reliable source, follow that source, right? Like you can follow the trail for a source sometimes. And so that's what I would be really interested in business information, is where is this person getting that information? What is the, like in business information, we talk about primary and secondary is like info you do yourself, and secondary stuff you find like through the library, for example. But what is like the first source? Where does this originate? And I think that's a really good kind of way of thinking about business information, is like, where did this information originate? Because then you can kind of follow through. So those questions I definitely mentioned at the beginning is great. I'm also just pulling up the SIFT framework is a quite good one. I try to like stay away from just mentioning those in presentations, because then I find like people get stuck on them, right? But this one is stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace claims. And I would say that trace claims is just really, really important in business. Like, who is saying this? And like, do they have the authority to say that, right? And that's one of the like core parts, I think, of business information. And the other thing is like, I think you have to keep your eyes out in business information on how data gets transformed too, and how data gets taken out of context. And so that's why tracing those claims back is really important as well. And I mean, it's tough, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you could use that to your advantage, but what does that actually do to your decision making down the line, right? If you really want to be evidence-based, then like trace those claims to the origin. And that's what I'd say is like, even more than what we've talked about, really, really important in business information, tracing those claims. And like, I mean, more than others, like you talked about the expiration date, like business moves so fast. So definitely like check the dates too that this stuff was published in. Yeah.
Those are some great tips. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for the question.
I think I saw Nicole. Were you asking any question?
Oh, yes. Just a quick one. So do we, for the decal stuff, do we need to take the course first? I see here on the website, there's like design it custom vinyl decals sort of workshop. So I was wondering if we need to take that before we can come and use the space.
Great question, Nicole. For the vinyl cutting equipment, the training is included in the first half hour of your booking automatically. So you don't need to take that course before taking the training. We only are currently using that approach where we're asking people to take a course first with 3D printing, just because there's quite a bit of information to relay. And we're seeing a lot of interest in 3D printing. So we're just, yeah, that's kind of why that course requirement is there. In the case of vinyl cutting, if people are interested, what courses are about the Design It courses, they're really about exploring the technology through a design challenge. So the staff member who's facilitating that is going to take people through a design provocation and kind of show them the process. So you'll pick up a lot of the skills that you would pick up in the training that we're going to provide as part of your booking, but it's through the lens of a specific project, and they can be quite fun. And I'll mention too, to keep an eye out on those, because that's where we've been previewing some of the technology that will be launched in the EPL makerspace later this year. So we'll be bringing a Fab Lab online with access to a laser cutter, a CNC machine, and even bookmaking equipment. And we've been doing interactive demos through those Design It classes, showing off that technology. So recently we had somebody do a course on making laser cut book covers for a book, or making geometric pattern coasters with the laser cutter. So watch out for those. Those are a great opportunity for learning and creation as well.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Does anyone have any other questions before we wrap up the session today? Okay, perfect. So if no questions, I want to thank everyone for staying with us and for participating. And I want to thank Celine, Holly, and Colleen for organizing this event. It's really beneficial for entrepreneurs, students, for our community. And thank you for Arun for helping organizing. And I know it's Friday afternoon. I wish everyone an amazing day, amazing weekend, sunshine outside, and hope to see everyone to our future events. And don't forget to fill out our survey. We always aim to improve and would appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And thank you, Marina, too, for all your work on this. Marina has done so much work on this, too. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.